July 14th, 2022, 11:15 p.m. 21-year-old Emily Carter steps out of her apartment building in Columbus, Ohio, holding a small canvas tote and the worn notebook she carried almost everywhere. The hallway security camera captures the moment clearly. The quiet corridor, the flicker of the overhead light, the soft click of the door closing behind her. Outside, the street is calm. Emily pauses for just a second beneath the entrance camera, glances toward the sidewalk, then turns left and walks out of frame. It is the last confirmed footage of her alive. When detectives first review the video after Emily is reported missing, nothing appears unusual. No one follows her out of the building. No car pulls up. No sign of a struggle. Just a college student leaving home late at night. Investigators replay the footage again and again. They zoom into every corner of the frame. They slow the video to half speed. But each time, they reach the same frustrating conclusion. Emily Carter simply walked away. But months later, someone studying the footage noticed something every detective had missed. Not a person, not a car, just a small detail sitting quietly in the corner of the frame. A detail so ordinary that no one thought it mattered. By that point, Emily's apartment had already been searched. Inside her bedroom, beneath a stack of psychology textbooks, investigators discovered a diary she had been writing in for years. Most of the pages were normal. Notes about college classes, thoughts about friends, small frustrations about everyday life, until they reached page 47. Because on that page, written just days before Emily disappeared, she wrote a single sentence that investigators would not fully understand until much later. A sentence that named the person she believed had been watching her. And once detectives connected that entry to what the security camera actually captured that night, the entire investigation changed. The question was no longer where Emily Carter had gone. The question was how everyone managed to miss the person who had been there the entire time. July 14th, 2022, 11:15 p.m. 21-year-old Emily Carter steps out of her apartment building in Columbus, Ohio, holding a small canvas tote and the worn notebook she carried almost everywhere. The hallway security camera captures the moment clearly. The quiet corridor, the flicker of the overhead light, the soft click of the door closing behind her. Outside, the street is calm. Emily pauses for just a second beneath the entrance camera, glances toward the sidewalk, then turns left and walks out of frame. It is the last confirmed footage of her alive. When detectives first review the video after Emily is reported missing, nothing appears unusual. No one follows her out of the building. No car pulls up. No sign of a struggle. Just a college student leaving home late at night. Investigators replay the footage again and again. They zoom into every corner of the frame. They slow the video to half speed. But each time, they reach the same frustrating conclusion. Emily Carter simply walked away. But months later, someone studying the footage would notice something every detective had missed. Not a person, not a car, just a small detail sitting quietly in the corner of the frame. A detail so ordinary that no one thought it mattered. By then, Emily's apartment had already been searched. Inside her bedroom, beneath a stack of psychology textbooks, investigators discovered a diary she had been writing in for years. Most of the pages were normal. Notes about classes, thoughts about friends, small frustrations about everyday life, until they reached page 47. Because on that page, written just days before Emily disappeared, she wrote a single sentence that investigators would not understand until much later. A sentence that named the person she believed had been watching her. And once detectives connected that entry to what the security camera actually captured that night, the entire investigation changed. The question was no longer where Emily Carter had gone. The question was how everyone managed to miss the person who had been there the entire time. But to understand how that detail went unnoticed, you have to understand who Emily Carter was before the night she vanished. Emily was the kind of person people described as steady. Not reckless, not impulsive. Friends often said she planned everything 2 steps ahead. She was a junior at Ohio State University, studying psychology with the goal of becoming a therapist. Professors described her as focused and thoughtful, the kind of student who stayed after class to ask careful questions rather than rushing out the door. She worked part-time at a small campus bookstore 3 evenings a week. It was quiet work, shelving books, helping students find assigned reading, sometimes recommending novels she had already read herself. Emily liked routines. Her mornings started with coffee from the same cafe 2 blocks from campus. She sat at the same corner table almost every weekday morning, reviewing class notes before lectures began. She ran 3 times a week along the Olentangy Trail, always during daylight, always with the same music playlist in her headphones. Her friends say Emily was careful about personal safety. She shared her location with 2 close friends. She avoided walking alone late at night unless it was a short distance, and she texted people when she arrived home. That is why her disappearance confused everyone who knew her, because nothing about Emily's habits suggested someone who would simply vanish without telling anyone where she was going. But this is where something small begins to feel different. In the weeks before July 14th, Emily had quietly started writing more frequently in her diary. Not every day, but often enough that when investigators eventually read through it, the entries formed a pattern. At first, the notes were simple observations, mentions of someone she thought she had seen around campus more than once. A man standing near the bookstore one afternoon. Someone sitting alone at the far end of the cafe. The entries were cautious, almost uncertain. Emily never claimed anything definite. The small lines like, I might be imagining this, or maybe it is just coincidence. But the mentions kept appearing, and each time, Emily described the same unsettling feeling, that someone had been watching her. Still, she never told her friends directly. She never reported it to campus security. She never contacted the police. Looking back, investigators believe there was a reason for that, because Emily herself was not yet convinced anything was wrong. But this is where the timeline begins to narrow. On July 12th, 2 days before she disappeared, Emily wrote one of the shortest entries in the entire notebook. Only 3 sentences. I saw him again today, near the bookstore. I know it is the same person. Then the entry stopped for almost 48 hours, until the final one, page 47. But that entry would not be discovered until after Emily was already gone. The day of July 14th begins normally. Emily attends 2 summer semester classes that morning. Both professors later confirmed she appeared focused and calm. She took notes. She asked a question during a discussion about behavioral patterns. Nothing about her behavior stood out. At 3:15 in the afternoon, she clocks in at the campus bookstore for her evening shift. Her manager later tells investigators Emily seemed exactly like she always did. Friendly with customers, organized with the inventory, quietly recommending a few psychology books to a freshman student. At 7:42 that evening, she clocks out. A coworker walks with her part of the way toward her apartment building. They talk briefly about a movie they both planned to watch that weekend. Nothing in that conversation suggested fear. Nothing suggested Emily believed she was in danger. But this is the moment where the last normal hours begin slipping away. Because sometime after Emily returned home that evening, something changed. At 9:36 p.m., Emily sends a text message to her friend Kayla. The message reads simply, "Did you ever feel like someone is watching you even when no one is there?" Kayla replies a minute later with a joking response, asking if Emily has been watching too many crime documentaries again. Emily never responds. 39 minutes later, at 11:15 p.m., the apartment hallway camera records Emily stepping outside. She is carrying her tote bag, and the notebook, the same diary investigators would later find open on her desk. Emily pauses briefly beneath the camera. Then she walks into the darkness beyond the streetlight. What no one realized at the time was that something else had already appeared in that frame. Something small, something sitting quietly in the background. And once investigators eventually connected that detail to the words written on page 47, the entire case would begin to unravel. July 14th, 2022, 11:15 p.m. The hallway camera records Emily Carter stepping through the front door of her apartment building. The footage is clear enough to show the canvas tote on her shoulder and the small notebook in her hand. The timestamp glows in the corner of the screen. 11:15 and 3 seconds p.m. Emily pauses for less than a second beneath the camera. She glances down the sidewalk, then turns left and walks toward the darker end of the street. 11:15 and 8 seconds p.m. She disappears beyond the reach of the streetlight. And that is where the footage ends. At least, that is what investigators believed for the first several weeks of the case. Emily Carter is reported missing the next afternoon when she fails to appear for a group study session and does not answer any phone calls. Her friend Kayla is the first person to become concerned. By evening, Emily's parents are contacted. By nightfall, a missing persons report is filed with the Columbus Police Department. Detectives begin with the simplest explanation. Did Emily leave voluntarily? Her apartment tells them otherwise. Nothing appears packed. Her wallet is still inside. Her laptop sits open on the desk. The bed is unmade, as if she had expected to return later that night. Her phone is missing, but it has been turned off since shortly after midnight. This is where the investigation begins narrowing around the last known moment she was seen. Police obtained the hallway security footage from Emily's building the following morning. They watched the clip repeatedly. The conclusion feels frustratingly simple. Emily walks out alone. No one follows her through the door. No vehicle approaches. No confrontation occurs inside the frame. Just a young woman leaving her building. But investigators begin reconstructing the timeline anyway. 11:15 p.m. Emily exits her building. 11:18 p.m. A nearby traffic camera records a figure believed to be Emily walking along Summit Street, heading north. The image is grainy, but the clothing appears similar. 11:22 p.m. Her phone briefly connects to a cell tower less than half a mile from her apartment. After that moment, the signal disappears. Detectives begin canvassing the area the next morning. They knock on doors. They check businesses for exterior cameras. They search nearby alleys and parking lots. But nothing shows Emily again. And that absence slowly begins shaping the theory that will guide the early investigation. Because when someone disappears without a visible struggle, investigators often look first at the people closest to them. Within 48 hours, detectives begin interviewing Emily's friends, co-workers, and family. Everyone tells the same story. Emily was careful. Emily was organized. Emily did not make reckless decisions late at night, which raises the question investigators keep returning to. Why was she outside at 11:15 p.m.? One detail begins attracting attention. The text message Emily sent to Kayla earlier that evening. Did you ever feel like someone is watching you even when no one is there? At first it sounds like an anxious thought. Maybe stress from school. Maybe nothing at all. But investigators start asking whether Emily might have arranged to meet someone. Her phone records show a few recent calls to an unfamiliar number during the previous week. The number belongs to a graduate student named Daniel Brooks. Daniel tells detectives he met Emily once at the campus library. They spoke briefly about psychology coursework. According to him, their conversations never continued beyond a few short messages. Still, detectives question him extensively. Daniel cooperates fully. He provides phone records and location data showing he was at his apartment across town that night with two roommates. The timeline checks out, but by now the investigation has begun drifting toward another theory. What if Emily left willingly with someone she trusted? Detectives examine her social media accounts. They look through messages. They search for any sign of conflict or hidden relationships. Nothing appears. Weeks pass. Search teams comb through nearby wooded areas and drainage canals. Divers examine a small reservoir 2 miles from Emily's apartment. Nothing is found, but this is where something important begins happening inside the investigation. The security footage from Emily's building becomes the central piece of evidence. Detectives review it again and again. They zoom into every shadow, every reflection in the glass door, every passing car in the distance. Still, nothing unusual appears. The official working theory begins shifting. Perhaps Emily experienced a mental health crisis. Perhaps she left intentionally and something happened afterward far from the building. By early September, the case begins losing momentum. Media coverage slows. Searches become less frequent. Emily's parents continue pleading for information, but no new leads emerge. And the hallway footage remains the last confirmed sighting. But months later, the investigation takes a quiet turn no one expected. Because while detectives had been focusing on the center of the frame, someone else was studying the edges. Someone who noticed something so small it had blended into the background every time the footage played. Not a face, not a car, just an object. An object that appears in the frame minutes before Emily walks outside. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. But when investigators finally connect that object to something written inside Emily Carter's diary, the entire timeline begins to change. Because if that detail meant what it appeared to mean, then Emily had not walked into the night alone. And the person she believed had been watching her might have been closer than anyone realized. By the beginning of 2023, the investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance had slowed to something quiet and frustrating. There were no confirmed sightings, no physical evidence, no new witnesses. The hallway footage from July 14th remained the final moment anyone had seen her. Detectives had watched it countless times. Every time, the same conclusion seemed unavoidable. Emily Carter walked out of her building alone. But in January of 2023, a new set of eyes looked at the case. Detective Marcus Alvarez had recently transferred to the Columbus Police Department's cold case unit. Part of his assignment involved reviewing open investigations that had stalled without explanation. Emily's file landed on his desk less than a week into the job. At first glance, the case looked painfully familiar. A young adult disappears without witnesses. No clear suspect. No confirmed crime scene. But Alvarez noticed something investigators often encounter with missing person cases. Sometimes the most important detail is not what appears in the center of the evidence. It is what sits quietly around the edges. So Alvarez began where many investigators start when reopening a case. He went back to the beginning. The diary. Emily Carter's notebook had already been cataloged as evidence months earlier. Detectives had read every page, searching for names or threats. Most of the entries seemed ordinary, until Alvarez reached page 47, the final entry. It was written just 2 days before Emily disappeared. The handwriting was slightly more hurried than usual, as if the thought had come quickly and she wanted to capture it before it slipped away. The sentence read simply, "I notice him now, the man with the green bike." At first, Alvarez assumed the line had already been investigated. But when he checked the case notes, he noticed something surprising. The entry had never been connected to a specific suspect, because no one had reported seeing a man with a green bicycle near Emily, at least not in the witness interviews. But this is where Alvarez returned to the piece of evidence everyone believed they already understood: the hallway footage. He watched the clip from 11:15 p.m. again. Emily stepping out, turning left, walking away. Then he rewound the footage several minutes earlier. 11:09 p.m. The hallway is empty. 11:10 p.m. Still nothing. But at 11:11 p.m., something enters the far corner of the frame outside the building's glass door. It appears for less than 2 seconds. Most people watching the footage would barely notice it. A bicycle wheel rolling past the edge of the camera's view. Alvarez paused the video, rewound it, played it again, this time slower. The wheel rolls into the corner of the frame and stops briefly beneath the streetlight outside. Just enough for the color to appear clearly. Green, not a dark shadow, not black or silver, a bright green frame. Then the bicycle moves out of view again. 3 minutes later, at 11:15 p.m., Emily Carter steps outside the building and walks in the same direction the bicycle had gone. This single detail changed the entire timeline, because investigators had assumed Emily left into an empty street. But the footage suggested someone had already been waiting nearby, someone who knew the building, someone who had been there minutes before she stepped outside. And once Alvarez connected that image to Emily's diary entry, the case shifted immediately. The man with the green bike. But identifying a bicycle in a city like Columbus is not simple. Thousands of people ride them. So Alvarez looked somewhere else. He examined the weeks leading up to Emily's disappearance. He returned to the places she visited most often: the cafe, the bookstore, the trail where she ran. At the bookstore, he spoke again with Emily's former manager. And during that conversation, something unexpected surfaced. The manager remembered a man who had come into the store several times that summer. He rarely bought anything. Mostly he walked through the aisles slowly, occasionally asking questions about psychology books. And every time he had parked a bicycle outside the front window, green. The description led investigators to a man named Aaron Leland, 32 years old, a delivery courier who frequently worked in the university district. When detectives reviewed nearby business cameras from earlier in the summer, they began spotting the same bicycle outside the cafe where Emily studied, across the street from the bookstore, near the entrance to the running trail, always in the background, always just far enough away that no one noticed. But the most important footage came from a small grocery store camera 2 blocks from Emily's apartment. At 11:17 p.m. on July 14th, just 2 minutes after Emily left her building, the camera records a man walking beside a bright green bicycle. And walking next to him is Emily Carter. She appears calm, not restrained, not struggling, which explains why no witnesses reported a crime. But the footage reveals something investigators had missed. Emily is not walking freely. Aaron Leland is holding the strap of her canvas tote bag, guiding her. When detectives later confront Leland with the evidence, his explanation collapses quickly. Phone records place him near Emily's apartment that night. Search history on his computer reveals months of visits to locations Emily frequently used. And inside his apartment, investigators recover Emily's phone. The truth that emerges is disturbing but tragically simple. Aaron Leland had been watching Emily for weeks, following her routine, learning when she left work, where she studied, when she ran. The night of July 14th, he waited outside her building with the bicycle. When she stepped onto the sidewalk, he approached her and convinced her to walk with him a short distance. But the encounter did not end there. Evidence later showed Emily never returned home. In late 2023, Aaron Leland was convicted in connection with Emily Carter's disappearance. The investigation that once seemed empty had been rebuilt around a detail most people never saw: a bicycle wheel in the corner of a frame. But the moment that truly broke the case open had been written months earlier. Quietly, inside a diary, page 47, Emily Carter knew someone was watching her, and she wrote down the one detail she believed mattered: the man with the green bike. Sometimes the smallest observation can become the most important evidence in a case. And sometimes the person closest to the truth is the victim who tried to warn the world before anyone else realized what was happening. Emily Carter's story is now used in investigative training across several departments. A reminder that evidence is not always hidden. Sometimes it is simply overlooked. And sometimes the truth waits quietly in the corner of the frame until someone finally knows where to look.